Hello. So I do one type of exercise sometimes is I try to dive into some references and I try to reconstruct them and understand what makes things work. And I particularly liked the recent ad by Claude, which was basically about, it was called Keep Thinking, but the main idea was that they were showing about like how everything is like problematic, how like the problems, and then the kind of the solutions came in as a way of like, using AI to solve it. And there are many things of why this ad is particularly well made, I should say. First of all, I feel like it's just made something that other brands wish they had. So, for example, they had this kind of very humane feel, very kind of earthy ones, very kind of down to very realistically human. And I feel like that's what many brands are aspiring to be, but they are not there because they're trying to imitate humanity in some kind of weird ways. And I think Claude did it in very kind of interesting ways and shapes. And basically they did like a couple of mixed media type of thing, which I really like. And I generally, what I wanted to do is, because I want to eventually make a couple of advertisement movies myself, I wanted to learn from it. And the way I learn from it is I want to go through each scene and understand the dynamic of it, understand how did they shot it, what made it work, what was kind of editing of it, how did it translate from one scene to another, because I definitely feel like there is some kind of transition things here that are almost like unnoticeable for people who are just watching as a consumer of this. And then I want to kind of maybe make a couple of lessons to myself. One thing that I've already started doing, I basically took a screenshot every 1.5 seconds, and it's already very obvious that they shot a lot of material for this. They are making the they're shooting everything on film, it seems like, because it's very kind of like grainy, and I would doubt that this kind of grain and this kind of like feel comes from something digital. It might be just like in editing, but I kind of judge by the blurriness. Again, I'm not as expert here, but it feels like they just really spent really good amount of time just filming it, in some kind of in some kind of interesting way. And given the amount of shots they did, I suspect they kind of used the film, and it was very expensive, but they trained all of the actors. They shot like with absolutely different people. They didn't follow one person. They were kind of probably trying to show like multitudes of different solutions there. And I really like how in many shots they showed people in some kind of unconventional positions to how the modern, like, enter like the advertisement work. So for example, person on the floor, it's not like, it looks very cool because it's not being used. Because usually if you look at any ads done right now, people are usually being sit down like on the table, but even at the table they're using this kind of symmetrical thing where people are sitting on interesting chairs on a very dusty kind of, and very dirty background. They're using different kind of, styles of cinema. They are overlapping something that is considered like, a home style movie with some kind of animation that was probably made in Claude. Generally, I like also how they switch between the darker shots, the lighter shots, the medium shots, and it's just like, I feel like it's really good. So let's dive into maybe frame after frame, and I will also try to frame it why some of it works and some of it doesn't. I think the taste comes somewhere from here, because the obvious idea would be to remove kind of the lines in very kind of linear process, but what they did, they actually kind of did some kind of imperfections here where it kind of doesn't evaporate in one kind of streamlined, it kind of evaporates in kind of interesting sequence. I don't want to take it for granted. I kind of feel like they did it on purpose. They also matched some of this kind of, music and the switching of the shots here. So when the person starts banging their head against the wall, you can see that problems started living in the first frame, then survived in the second frame. And when the second frame came to a conclusion, the previous thing kind of disappeared, which gives this kind of really interesting imperfection of, like, you know, frames being overlapped in kind of interesting sequence. I would definitely love to use something like this, you know, in my ways. Then you have this kind of really interesting ways of them showing that, hey, there is something missing, but then absolutely different environment. And you can see they use it again, where they show something that belonged to the previous frame. They show it again in the next frame, but then again they remove it in the next frame. So it's kind of like really interesting how they like there are almost like two stories that are overlapped in the very first frames when they're like showing us basically the problem. They show us something like the critical element of like breaking a pencil, which is very nice. They're showing the coffee machine, probably relating to office and stuff. I really like how they even worked it here. Basically, someone designed problems as this kind of graphical work based off shapes and run the printer, turned it all also like in a very interesting kind of angle. It's not like really taking the maximum space, which would be just a horizontal one. They put it a little bit on the angle, which I feel like might add a little bit of dramatism to this thing. And again, they do it. They take the shape, they bring it to the next frame, they keep it, and let me guess, it will right now disappear. It doesn't disappear in the same, it disappears in the next kind of when the frame switches, but within the same room, which is also kind of interesting kind of ideas. We have like the file. There is some kind of motion. Usually I think like this was a moving frame, this was static frame, this was static frame, this was static frame, static, 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 and this is the first one where some movement happens. And I feel like that's quite important because it feels like they're introducing more and more complexity over time. And just so you would know, we are on the second number 6. So all of those, I feel like 6 scene or whatever happened in 6 seconds, which is an insane tempo. You know, it's just like it requires, imagine like, you know, are directing this, like mood storyboarding. It's basically the things are happening again and again and again. I really don't take it for granted. It's someone's really well done job here. So they did this. They actually, I think they kind of, you know, did this JPEG file and then they duplicated it a couple of times and they renamed it to make it look like, you know, like a custom file, because this is Mac OS, judging by the looks of it, but they changed the kind of the icons to make it look more custom, which I appreciate. Then they see this guy, which kind of lasts almost like less than a second, I should say. It lasts from 20. It literally lasts less than a second, the exposure to this guy. We have this dark architecture, echo chamber of intrusive thoughts. I didn't even notice that when I was kind of, you know, just watching this as an ad. But look how tastefully they done it. They basically took something like, you know, some kind of volume, and kind of put it there. Okay, so they zoomed in, so it was my bad that they did it. But again, very dramatic, kind of 1.5, maybe 2x zoom into thing. Very nicely done. They shape these books very well. I really like how it's done, and they probably used the fan or something to kind of turn some pages around. Again, very interesting. You can see that it bends here, so they're using something kind of quite wide here, or even like one of these lenses which are how do you call them, anamorphic ones. So maybe anamorphism kind of adds this kind of curvature on the edges and this kind of extreme blur, so it kind of adds to the whole thing. I feel like they were using it before here as well. It's just like very zoomed out. This feels like, again, you can see that it kind of bends unless it's architectural there. It feels like it's all, they all filmed it with kind of anamorphic lenses here. Okay, let's go further. Department. I really love this because, again, I don't feel like they did it in post. I feel like they really truly printed it, and they also found the place, which is like this kind of brutalistic place, and they kind of brought this up. They also made quite a big quite a big sign. An interesting part, I don't know if this is intentional or not, but usually to make the sign like this look good, you have to make more margins on the sides and then less margins on the verticals. They flipped it here, so it intentionally looks dramatic, unless it was someone's mistake. But I think that if I would try to design a sign like this, I would make departments and then off problems on the new line, so it would look more balanced. And it looks weirdly unbalanced here, so maybe it might be a mistake, but also I will not be in doubt if it will be if it were kind of intentional. Okay, we see the how do you call it, fractals zooming in, kind of like the complexity. We see very, very close up shot. And they, by the way, something that I noticed is that the aspect ratio was quite wide, and then suddenly it changes to this kind of almost like squish, like more 4:3. And I feel like, yeah, and again, then they switch again. Let me watch it with sound. I'm kind of curious. It's just the sound design is also quite, I feel like they kind of almost intentionally recorded cacophony, just like, to assemble it. Really nice, really like this graphic. Things moving out. By the way, when I think here, it was also very interesting how they overlaid problems on top of it. It's almost unnoticeable, but you get this vibe of the chaos, which is really, really something that I appreciate. Again, kind of a close-up shot, but then you have like very wide shot with different kind of formulas. We can see the problems are spanning. Here, different languages that are being used for the word form problems. We see this thing. This was quite hard. I imagine this would be quite hard to animate. There are some things on how to do it, but they basically coded it so it's maybe in After Effects to make this symbol come up, and then you see those symbols reveal the letters, but they reveal it in some kind of interesting order, which is quite interesting to me. Let me write it down. Yeah. Then I really love how they extend this for like maybe 2 seconds or even like almost 3 seconds. And even when I was screenshotting, you can see that it really took them, they really, out of all comparison to all other frames, they take almost 3 frames just for this dramatic transition into the solution, which I really, really love. And there are different the tempo of this ad is also feels correct, which is something that I really, really appreciate. Okay, then we go to the solution where they reverse the destruction of the piano, which is very nice. And by the way, it's even wider than before. So you can remember we had this kind of the full frame, we had like the cropped frame 4.3, and right now they went into something that is probably 16:10 or even like 20:10, like something, it looks like IMAX. In a way, IMAX is wrong, but you can see this almost like a cinematic cutout in already cinematic film, which is kind of like really, really nice. I really also like this zoom in. It feels like very intentional and very like, it doesn't try to shout with some kind of logo, it just shows it in real motion. And again, this frame is majestic. They found this place somewhere, but I like the double framing. Usually it's a very interesting way to grab someone's attention. So if you will calculate the amount of framing they did here, they have this kind of black gaps on the side, then which we already know is kind of intentional. Then they have one kind of cutout. Then they have another cutout, and then we have the human that we saw in the close-up just before, and supposedly. And I really love this zoom in. It really feels very good. Although those shots are really, really different, I just like it zooms out in a very good sequence. I really like this thing where they kind of, they say race trial, and they don't try to make everything like super readable. They just give the vibe through it, and I like how they do it. And then they just show like, this kind of working in the dirty environment on a bike. Again, they switch from a very close up to a wider frame. I can see this halation and bloom that is happening on the backside. Again, I kind of feel like it's anamorphic lens on top of film camera. I would be very surprised if they filmed it digitally. And then they have this kind of, zoom in. This is very cool shot when they show the chessboard that is levitating on top of glass table, and then they show the person between them. It's just like, this is piece of art. I think this would be like a good GIF, even just this one. Sorry. This is like amazing piece. It's like really nice, really nice. Then we have the zoom in into Claude, and I really like how they started. Like, there's a lot of, I don't know again if it's intentional or not, but they mention a lot of musical things here. So note, 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 voice, chord, 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 and they immediately switch to a guy that does the music. But there is almost no sense that why it's music. We just saw him like in the entrance like a little bit, but I'm not sure there is like a proper connection here. You can see some notes, but it also looks like something architecture wise. But you can see that, for example, this light is definitely making it more interesting, the same as this cup of coffee. It feels like, it's very intentional, and the person kind of looking at the product and then looking back into the thing with this kind of velvety type of jacket, which is like very colorful, like between the floor and between the wall. It's just like very graded, very tasteful. I really like it. Then we have the zoom in into this dark, quite dirty environment about the rockets. Again, zoom into the workplace, zoom in into Claude, zoom out into the team, the people, and then we switch out. So this is quite nice. Then they show the photographer who we watch through their lens first, and then we transition into seeing how this person looks like, which is also very nice. Of course, very tasteful camera, red strap, everything is needed. They know to what kind of audience they tailor it, and I feel like they know that many Leica users and many Fujifilm photographers are using this kind of red strap, the thick one. So it's speaking to the audience who knows those knows. And I feel like it really feels like that. They're really making it tastefully. Even the lighting here, I should say, usually there is this lighting called rebrand blending, where you have like a small triangle on the cheek when you're photographing someone en face. But here, it's not unfast, and you have this kind of backlighting that highlighting the whole kind of nose and her face, and still you see that kind of triangle happening here. Again, I would say that it might be accident, but there is just so much intentional stuff that happening on almost like every frame that I doubt that it's not intentional. I doubt that. I feel like it's actually very intentional, and people who are filming this knew that people would notice those details in just very subtle ways, and photographer will notice the red strap, they will notice the Rembrandt triangle. The same as musicians, probably I might not notice something interesting here that that musicians will immediately spot. By the way, I don't know if this is true or again intentional or not, but this lamp looks like a note. A little bit like a musical note, if you know what I mean. Maybe if I rotate it, like it looks like a note. Again, feels like there are some kind of cues that might be very useful, to people. Then they want to flex on these graphics. Again, it's just very, very good. We can see this person running to something to draw. I think this is quite cool. Very kind of motion intensive thing compared to the previous slower shots. This one is literally someone's running. Very challenging. You can see that everything, almost every frame is blurred. There is no still shot, and I feel like that just changes the dynamic again of this video the same way we did it before. We can see that someone is working on the boat. We can see them kind of working again in the kind of real environment with someone making an action on the side. Someone is working deeper in work, and we have this symmetry where something really separates the frame into two parts. Then we have kind of maybe visualization of this. This is really nice shot. So they show us very wide scape. Again, it's cut out very interestingly where it's cut on the top and on the bottom now. And then they overlay the UI on top of people. And then they sometimes also overlay the things on top of the fences, which is very interesting. And they kind of try to, mask it towards it. And then they show something from the backside, and then you also see those small details just on the edge. This is masterpiece. This is not This is really intentional and they knew what they're doing, and this is really, really cool how they did it. And I feel like it also kind of connects us from the arts and sciences like into this kind of more aesthetic sciences into like medical sciences, into something that is like, hey, this is like how human works, and let's kind of dive into the human work. Again, very interesting shape, very interesting composition. They're not afraid to cut the person's head in half basically to show this shot, and it's artistic choice. Definitely very, very well done. And we see something in purely clinical view. We see one blink that person makes at the beginning, and then we automatically switch to, you know, person kind of dancing in the warm room in absolute opposite to what that environment was. And suddenly they are in this location. By the way, one thing that I have to appreciate, as many as there is a lot of actors, there is also the vibrant diversity of locations. Like there are cathedrals, open air, road, laboratory, Brutilli's building. Like I can't even count all of the references. And whoever was editing and filming this and scripting generally did a really good job of, you know, scouting and taking all of those things into one place. And again, very close-up shot, wide shot, and it's definitely not, you know, accidental. It's very intentional, very good. I will not tap into audio design. Let me hear it for a second. They didn't overlay the music here of the maybe they overlaid, but it might be like in my software doesn't. I thought they would kind of do it the same where the drummer and maybe the music plays in the same time, but it's not. It's kind of just one small detail. I don't think they did it, and I think that didn't spoil anything. It was just like, you know, another piece. But it's actually like, if I should say, it's in the tempo of the video, and it's in the tempo of the music that is used for the video. So they kind of did it though. Really like the thing here where they're kind of working. There is some food between them. Really liked how it works. Like it also, I don't know, it might be unintentional, but the oranges, the Claude Code orange, the wallpaper orange, it's kind of like, you know, even the hand here, the skin tone of this guy is gemmed to be more orangey, and you can see how greens are quite a lot. There is quite a lot of green, but it's all muted, and I feel like in this way they wanted to highlight the orange color here, because you can see that here and even in the background the orange and reds are really sticking out. I feel like they were going for this let's enhance orange in this kind of wide greenish background, and they did it quite well. They showed the dark photo, then they showed that family that was doing the rocket. Very cool and very nice kind of, you know, overlap of this kind of UI on top of which the live emotion works really, really well. Again, they're trying different kind of, you know, in home scene, and again you can see that the tones are generally very, very warm. Even here I would say, you know, orange on top of blue, very, very, very nice. They showed this kind of photography. This is probably the only stock they used, right? Or something like this would be hard to maybe design, so they probably just did it to show the expansion of universe, to show the stars, to transition to this frame, and this is also quite nice, very well made. We can see this insane location in the new one. I have to Google where it is, but it looks like something like Norway Church or whatever. Then we see the people's dancing also is being used in a nice way, and also I like the transition from professional dancing into more like amateur dancing, like of the guy. Well, I'm sorry to him, maybe he's professional dancer, but it looks like, hey, I'm just like composing music and I'm dancing to it. And again, you can see insane location, muted green, warm orange from the light. And again, light exists there the same way it existed before in that shot with the guy who makes notes. Very intentional detail, I suppose, and it's very well done. Again, a lot of orange and a lot of like interesting overlap on top of things. The person right in the frame, trying to make it more humanistic. Everything is very grainy, blurry, like very nicely made. We can see some actor who's probably actor in this frame, but again, even the skin tone here is closer to Claude, more humanistic, very well done. Then we see this person, and then this. Again, this is particularly tasteful to me because, first of all, do you remember I was telling you about the department of problem sign and how unbalanced it is? This is super balanced. Suddenly, it's kind of, it made so well. And of course, it's not like they took it from UI. They really made it like a proper button with the proper kind of, margins and everything. And it really seems like this, they really used it and they kind of tried to press on each and kind of support it with some kind of imagery on the back. So we can see that it takes 1 frame, 2 frame, 1 frame, 2 frame, 1 frame, 2 frame. So it's like 2 frames for each of actions, and again, very muted green, very highlighted orange up to the skin tones, and it's just like very, very good. And then we can see this shot. By the way, I'm not sure, let me rewatch it. Yeah, it's kind of like they connect everything through code, which is very, very lovely. Like, hey, we have a real application to it. Maybe these are the same guys that were on a boat, and that's why they were showing them, but honestly, I can't even remember. Even if I will move there, I'm not sure I will recognize them in this way. But it's really nice how they kind of show this, the code being like coming through everything. I feel like that's also sends a little bit idea of the mission, and I like how they use the birds to be like the beginning of that wave, and then the code kind of follows that wave, which is also quite tasteful. We can see it works for music, again, high curvature kind of design, very nice actors, very realistic actors. We can see bearded people, we can see people with different skin tones, we can see people with different like things, but like the orange is just prevalent idea here. And then we see the guy that we briefly saw for a second, but now he has like this final scene with Claude. I really like how they kept the animated logo here. I really like how they are zooming out. I like how they made him take this kind of cable from this sound engineering. It just feels tasteful. And again, the tools, if you can see, all orange, the person is orange, and then the backs are all muted green and blue, which is very, very nice touch to add to this kind of, to this contrast. Generally, I really like this ad. I really like how many different, like, interesting, choice of frames they did. I really like this transition. I feel like that alone kind of is very, very cool, and I know they were pleased with these frames because it's really, really good. All of this kind of custom After Effects signals, not signals, but graphics that they did on top of the things with the runners, with even like when they're driving from the back, you can still see it for half a second, when the person is driving. I feel like that's amazing. I feel like that really shows their kind of dedication to it, and I don't take it for granted. They knew what they were doing for each frame. Nothing is accidental, and everything is very, very tasteful to show exactly the contrast they wanted. I will definitely took some learnings from it. So the first one is like frame overlay. They did it from the first one. So this is kind of the first thing that I really like. I like the warm versus cold color tones. I really like the relation between character and space. I like how they use prop lights in the background. I really like how they use the frames, like sub frames inside of the shots. I really like the change in focus. And then what else did I learn here? I really like the messy background, and they showed me like, I'm very good at this already, but I'm still doing, I will note it down because I do feel like it adds a little bit more humanistic feeling to it. I really like when they also overlap with some kind of shots like this, unconventional people shots, blurred, cut off and stuff. I really liked when they just show pure emotion without any need to actually show any UI on top of it, of people. And then I really liked when they kind of overlapped two frames of idea behind key sentence. And I really liked how they did it. Did they finish it? I feel like there is also something about sound design which is harder for me to explain, but it kind of brings the whole tempo together, and I feel like that's why it partly works for them. That's why it's really good. I should say one, if I can critique on something. By the way, look at this framing. Look at this. They cut it out. They made this circle on top of it. Like if I will just take it out, they just made this kind of circle and then this smaller circle inside, so we can see this one and then this one. So there are like one circle, two circle, and then third circle that is closer to dark, and the person right in the middle of it. I mean, this is tasteful. This is not accidental. They know what they do with this kind of stairs and the person being like in the podium of it. It's really, really nice. Centered, very, very nicely touched compositions generally around the human and around its ideas. I think the showing like the like really being in use, product in use, is also like very, very like cool job, and I really like the metaphors they used for the problem setting. I really like how they did it. Basically, for a 90-second like video is just amazing. I wish I would film something like this, and I will try. But honestly, this is really high bar that I would love to have as my inspiration. And there's definitely so many good things about it that I would love to repeat and to try. Even the selection of actors, selection of people. It might be someone who is like working with them. It might be hired actors, but it's really showing that, they did their homework for preparation and they did everything as good as they could. Even for some unrealistic scenes, I don't believe musicians will lie down on the wooden floor to sketch on something in their jackets, but it fits the vibe, with this kind of prop lightings in the back in the form of a note, or something like, the messy backgrounds. Being in the car was a really nice shot. Being on the boat was a nice shot. Also, they kind of stitched this together, which I'm surprised about, but they did it, and they did it quite well. Maybe it was like static, moving inside of the room, going out in the world, running, and then going back to the lab and kind of dancing. It's like really showing the variety of what people can do with the world. And again, I feel like it might be intentional here. Anyways, I hope you liked my breakdown, and I definitely kind of learned a lot, and I will try to reach this greatness in terms of the filmmaking myself one day. Thank you so much. Bye-bye.